Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 best four-wheeled off-roaders in Grand Theft Auto Online. So in this list, the reason that I say four-wheelers is because we are not going to put dirt bikes on this list because, well, obviously they're great off-road vehicles, but they have two wheels. So there's no dirt bikes on this list. I guess I could have just said that, but anyway, I think you get the point. Now, one other thing that I must mention before we get into this list, most of these vehicles are on here just based on my opinion. However, when we start getting a little bit higher into the rankings, per se the top three, they are going to be in order of the actual best off-road vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online. Again, exclusive to four-wheeled vehicles. Anyway guys, with that being said, let's start off with number 10. So guys, of course at number 10 we have the Vapid Sand King XL. This thing is a classic vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online. This thing has been in the game the entire time that it has been out, and it is a tried and true, proven off-road vehicle. This thing is an absolute monster. Obviously it has insanely high ground clearance, which definitely helps for off-roading. The reason that this thing is ranked so high on this list is because there's a lot of vehicles that are actually just a lot faster than this thing, which kind of give them an edge when off-roading. However, the Sand King XL is still a very capable off-roader. As you guys can see right now, I mean, we're just kind of trucking around here, just kind of, you know, scaling these hills. It's a solid vehicle overall. It has a ton of customization as well, which is always very nice for an off-road vehicle to have, or any vehicle in general for that matter. Overall, the Sand King is fantastic. It has so much suspension travel that it really just is a great off-roader. There's honestly not a whole lot to say about it. It's just fantastic at off-roading. It's a great car, and it's really cheap too. So you can steal this thing off of the street and get it for free, or you can buy it on Southern San Andreas Super Autos for very cheap. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 grand. So anyway guys, if you don't have a good off-roader and you don't have a lot of money, the Sand King XL is a solid one for you. Go pick it up if you don't have one already. Anyway guys, that's it for number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Alright guys, next up at number 9 we have one of the more unknown vehicles in the game. That is the Vapid Contender. This thing is super underrated. Now I'm not saying that nobody is going to know about the Contender. Obviously anyone who's into trucks is probably going to know about this thing. A lot of newer players don't seem to know that the Contender exists, and it's an absolutely awesome truck. Technically this thing is actually grouped under the SUVs category, so it's actually quite a bit faster than you would expect. It's actually, I'm gonna say, probably one of the faster vehicles on this entire list, to be honest. The Contender is an absolutely fantastic off-roader. It does not have nearly the suspension travel that the Vapid Sand King XL has. However, it is a lot faster, so you can usually get to places that are a little bit harder to access with this thing, a little bit easier than you will with the Sand King XL. The Contender goes for $250,000 on Southern San Andreas Super Autos, and it has a tiny little bit of customization that you can do to it, which is of course a nice feature. Still definitely not the best car on the list, that's for sure. However, it is one that I felt like deserved to be on the list in the first place, so there you have it. The Vapid Contender comes in at number 9. This thing is fantastic. It is one of my favorite trucks in the entire game, even, you know, technically an SUV, but let's be honest, it's a truck. Anyway guys, that's it for number 9. Let's move on to number 8. Alright guys, and next up at number 8 we have the Vapid Trophy Truck. Now this thing is a very dedicated off-road machine. It's literally a trophy truck which is made for desert racing, which is very cool. The Vapid Trophy Truck is actually just such a sick vehicle. I absolutely love this thing. Overall, the Trophy Truck is just a solid vehicle. As far as off-roading goes, honestly, the Trophy Truck is so good. It's so underrated. A lot of people don't really appreciate this thing, but it is just so good. Obviously, it should be. It's kind of a dedicated off-roader. It's really the only thing that this thing is, you know, exceptionally good at, but it's definitely a vehicle that I feel like is overlooked by a lot of the population of GTA, and I feel like people should give it a bit more of a chance. Now, it is a little bit more on the expensive side. I believe this thing costs about $800,000, which is a little bit steep. However, for that price, you do get a really unique vehicle. Overall, the Trophy Truck is just an underrated off-road machine. You guys should definitely pick one of these things up if you don't have one already. I'm sure a lot of you guys who are clicking on this video already do have one of these, but if you don't, it's definitely one to look out for, that's for sure. Anyway guys, I think that is pretty much it for number 8. The Trophy Truck truck is sick. Let's move on to number 7. Alright guys, next up we have the Canis Mesa at number 7. This thing is an absolutely awesome off-road vehicle. Obviously it is based off of a Jeep. I think that goes without saying. You guys probably knew that without me telling you. Now you can actually get this thing for free by stealing it from Merryweather, which is a very, very nice way to get one of these. You can actually get multiple because the mercenaries will actually come in several different vehicles, so you will have an opportunity to actually grab more than one of these if you do want them. They do have some pretty unique customization, albeit there's not a whole lot that you can do, but the Canis Mesa that I've got here is a pretty unique one, especially when you compare it to the regular Canis Mesa that you can get off of the streets regularly in Grand Theft Auto Online. This version is very, very cool. Now, albeit honestly, I think that the Vapid trophy truck is a better off-roader than this thing. However, I feel like this is a better overall vehicle in general, which is why it's ranked just ahead of the Vapid trophy truck. Both cars are really, really sick, and you should definitely pick up both of them. Now, the Canis Mesa is an absolute ton cheaper than the trophy truck, which makes it a lot better value for money, I would definitely say. So I would definitely recommend picking this thing up a little bit more than the trophy truck, especially if you're a little bit tight on money. Overall, both vehicles are pretty sick though, but I do feel like the Canis Mesa is just a little bit cooler. And yeah, this is nice. A good thing about this vehicle is it has an external roll cage, so your vehicle stays pretty well intact. I mean, the windows are bashed out of this thing, but overall we kind of survived this fall off this mountain. So hey, the Mesa, great vehicle. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for this one. Let's move on to number 6. Alright guys, next up we have the Big Bertha Vapid Guardian. This thing is an absolute unit in this game. Now it doesn't have the ground clearance that the Sand King XL does, and it's also a lot more expensive. However, it is also a lot cooler, I feel like. Now the Vapid Guardian is a lot faster than the Sand King XL. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the faster vehicles on this list so far, and it certainly is a very, very capable off-roader. And like I said, it doesn't have the ground clearance of the Sand King XL, however, it does have better speed, which is something that is important when you are off-roading, especially if you're trying to get a run up on a hill that you really shouldn't be getting up, but you want to try it anyways. The Vapid Guardian also has a decent amount of customization that you can actually do to it, which is always a very nice feature to have. Now the Guardian is not the best truck out there, that's for sure. It does tend to have a very bouncy suspension setup, so when you come down on top of a bump like this, so after you go over a jump and you land, the suspension tends to want to throw you back up into the air, which is a little bit frustrating. However, it's also kind of fun. It is a pretty cool off-road vehicle, I do think. Definitely one that you should check out if you've never checked it out before. It goes for about $375,000 on Southern San Andreas Super Autos, like I mentioned before. Obviously, as you guys can see, it is making quick work of these hills that I'm climbing up though, and it's really not slowing down. Well, except for now. But anyway, I think you guys get the point. The Vapid Guardian is a pretty sick ride. Sorry, sir. Don't mind me. Anyway, guys, I think that's pretty much it for number 6. Let's move on to number 5. Alright, guys, next up at number 5, we have one of the most customizable cars on the entire list, and that is the Nissanhelion. This thing is absolutely crazy, especially for customization options. As you guys can see, you can put exposed turbos on the hood instead of having an actual hood. There's all kinds of crazy options you can do to this thing. You can make it look absolutely insane. This is how I've got mine set up right now. I kind of just did the exhausting to show you guys for the video, but it is pretty darn cool. Anyway guys, the Nissanhelion is one of the most capable off-roaders in the entire game, I gotta say. When I did my original customization and review on this thing a few months ago, I was very impressed with this vehicle. It is a fantastic off-roader and one that I really don't see many people talking about. Now I'm sure in the off-road community in GTA, the Helion is a very well-known vehicle. However, for me personally, as somebody who's not really in that community, I had no idea about this thing until somebody told me about it. So I feel like if I tell you guys about it, hopefully there's going to be some of you that will have no idea about how capable and how awesome this vehicle is in general. Overall, the Helion is just a absolutely sick ride in GTA. I definitely think that a lot more people should buy this thing and actually use it. It's actually pretty fast too. It's actually a really good SUV. Overall, the Helion is just a fantastic vehicle. well. Anyway guys, definitely consider buying a Helion if you do not have one already. This thing is really awesome. Anyway, I think that is pretty much it for number 5. Let's move on to number 4. Alright guys, next up we have the Vapidriada. This thing is an absolute off-road machine. I was so impressed by this thing, very similar to the Helion when I did my customization and review on it many months ago, that I've actually never sold this vehicle. Now sometimes I will sell vehicles that I have bought just for a car customization just to recoup some of my money so that I can put it into more customizations and reviews later on in the future. However, I have kept this thing for the entire time and I have been impressed with it ever since I first stepped foot in it. This thing is an absolute unit and I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about right now. This thing can pretty much go as fast as you want around many corners that are off-road in this game. Like, this thing is actually crazy responsive off-road. The tires that it has have so much grip for some reason in comparison to a lot of the other vehicles. Now the only thing with the Riata is it is a pretty light vehicle, so you can get this thing out of control pretty easily if you send it a little bit too hard. But for the most part, it is actually a very controllable vehicle. Now the Riata is a little bit more on the expensive side. I believe this thing goes for almost 1.3 million. I could be wrong on that figure, but I'm pretty sure I remember it being somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.3 mil. And for that price, it is a little bit steep. However, for that price, you do get an absolutely fantastic off-road vehicle. Now the Riata is not really that great for doing anything else other than off-roading, but for off-roading, it is really solid. As you guys can see, the Riata is making pretty quick work of all of these dirt roads, and definitely there are a lot of vehicles that can do this, but the Riata just does it with some sort of confidence that a lot of other vehicles don't seem to do this sort of thing with. As you guys can see, it's just crawling over rocks. This thing has an absolute ton of ground clearance, which obviously helps with off-roading, especially for doing, you know, some rock crawling type stuff. Some a little bit more extreme off-roading, shall we say. On top of that, the Vapidriada also has an absolute ton of customization that you can actually do to it. The only problem is that this thing is a little tiny bit top heavy, I must say. The suspension is very high in the air, meaning the body of this thing is very high in the air, so it is a little bit top heavy. That is really my only complaint with the Riata. Other than that, this thing is a completely solid vehicle, and I definitely would recommend picking this thing up if you guys don't have one already. Anyway guys, that is pretty much it for the Vapidriada. Let's move on to number 3, and this is where we're going to start getting into some of the better off-road vehicles for actually racing. Alright guys, next up we have the Vapid Caracara 4x4. Now this is actually one of the best vehicles in the off-road category, with of course exception to the BF400, which is of course the best off-road vehicle in the entire game as far as racing goes. However, in some races, the BF400 is actually excluded, so the Caracara becomes the 3rd best off-road vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online for racing. Now, the Caracara is actually one of my favorite trucks in the entire game. I really like this thing. It's super closely based off of the F-150 in real life, which is a pretty cool truck, albeit not the coolest truck, but I like it. And the Caracara is absolutely insanely fast, especially for being a truck or an off-roader. This thing absolutely shreds. Climbing Mount Chiliad in the Caracara doesn't even feel like a challenge a lot of the time because this truck is just ridiculously fast. Now, I do believe that I actually have my Caracara lowered because I was using it more on the street than for anything else. However, it is still an absolutely fantastic off-roader, and even better than that, it is an absolutely fantastic off-road racer. The Caracara is a must-own in Grand Theft Auto Online, especially if you plan on doing some off-road races. This thing will almost never let you down. However, there are a couple of vehicles that are just a little bit faster when it comes to off-road racing in this game. However, we're going to get into those in a minute. Of course, the Caracara also has an absolute ton of customization that you can do to it, which is another great feature. Now, this thing is a little bit more on the expensive side. It's coming in at about $1.4 million, I believe. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've actually bought this truck, but regardless of the price, this is a truck that I would buy no matter what the cost was. This thing is absolutely insane, and I think that everybody should own a Caracara 4x4. Anyway guys, that is it for number 3. Let's move on to number 2. Alright guys, and next up we have the Canis Camacho. This thing is an absolutely fantastic off-road vehicle in this game. The Camacho is just an absolute unit. This is the 2nd fastest off-roader in the entire game, obviously excluding the BF400 again, but this thing is one that you can actually use in off-road races in Grand Theft Auto Online, and you have a very very good chance of winning, because the gap between the first and the second place vehicles in the off-road class is very close. And also the Camacho does have some pretty big advantages in certain situations over the vehicle that is at number 1, but we'll get into that when we actually get to number 1. But for right now, let's talk about the Camacho, of course. Now this thing is absolutely crazy fast. It's a little tiny bit faster than the Vapid Caracara, and it's got a little bit better handling and a few other things. It's also a little tiny bit wider than the Vapid Caracara, so it has less of a chance of actually rolling over. So that is a pretty big advantage, especially when you're doing some crazy off-roading like I am right now with this thing. On top of that, the Canis Camacho also has an absolute ton of customization that you can do to it. You can make this thing look as insane as you want to, or as tame as you want to. Overall, the Canis Camacho is an absolutely fantastic off-road vehicle, and if you're planning on doing some off-road racing, the Canis Camacho is one vehicle that you are going to want to have. This thing is absolutely fantastic. Anyway guys, I think that is pretty much it for number 2. Let's move on to the number 1 best off-roader in Grand Theft Auto Online, for racing at least. Alright guys, and at number 1 we have the Maxwell Vagrant. Now you might not expect this thing to actually be the fastest off-road vehicle in the entire game, but I can assure you it actually is. Now what I was meaning when I said the Camacho has certain advantages over the Maxwell Vagrant, the advantages that the Camacho has over this thing are that it weighs an absolute ton more than this, and it's also a lot bigger. So if people are using Maxwell Vagrants in your off-road race, you can of course bully them pretty hard with the Canis Camacho if you need to. Technically the Maxwell Vagrant will get the fastest time on an off-road based race. However, the Canis Camacho, if given the right circumstances, can easily destroy a Maxwell Vagrant simply based on how absolutely massive it is. If you can manage to get away from all of the competition in your off-road race, the Maxwell Vagrant is going to be the absolute best vehicle. However, if you're in close contention with a lot of other people, having a Canis Camacho when everybody else has Maxwell Vagrants will give you an absolutely massive advantage. You will be able to destroy all of them if you need to in order to get into first place. And the Camacho will actually keep up with this thing pretty decently. It would actually surprise you how good the Camacho is in comparison to this. Anyway guys, the Maxwell Vagrant is officially the best off-road vehicle in the entire game for racing. However, I would say that it is probably not the best actual off-roader in the entire game, but I felt like I should do this thing as the number 1 because technically it is the fastest out of all of them. Anyway guys, there you have it. That has been the top 10 best off-road vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online. Let me know what you thought of my list down below. Let me know if you think I missed any cars, and maybe I will make a part 2 to this video. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed the video, a like is always appreciated, if not dislike. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.